Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining us on this lovely December day. My name is Jenny Chase. On behalf of the National Glass Association, I would like to welcome you to today's Thirsty Thirsty webinar on registered Glazier Apprenticeship. Before we begin, I'd like to introduce you to our panelists. We have with us Amy Hadfield. Amy is NGA's new Director of Apprenticeship. She comes to NGA from the New York State Department of Labor, where she was most recently Apprenticeship Training Supervisor. And in her role at NGA, she is your primary contact for all things apprenticeship. I'd also like to welcome Joshua Johnson. Joshua is the founder of the Redemption Collective, which is a strategy and talent firm that helps employers, industry associations, and workforce systems strengthen their talent pipelines and build future-ready workforce solutions. Josh spoke at the recent GlassBuild America event, and he will also be a keynote speaker at the upcoming 2026 BEC conference in Louisville, not Louisville. I've been told this, it's very important, in Louisville, Kentucky, this March. So speaking about the BEC conference, it's just a few months away, and we're very excited about this upcoming event. It's going to have great speakers. For those of you who are fellow bourbon drinkers, there's the Bourbon Trail experience, and there's also going to be an opportunity to take home your own engraved bat from the Louisville Slugger Museum and Factory. And as I said, we have a great lineup of education. Josh will be a part of that, and we're really excited to see you there. So registration for the BEC event is now open on glass.org if you're interested in attending that. So I'm going to hand the presentation over to Amy and Josh as our experts. So please join me in welcoming them, and we'll talk about how apprenticeship can help you build your workforce, build your project pipeline. If you have questions as we go through the presentation, please pop them into the chat, and then we have reserved 10-15 minutes at the end to answer those for you. So if something comes to mind as we're chatting, please just list your question and we will get to it at the end of the session. So I'm going to turn this over to Amy and Josh. Thank you.
All right, thank you, Jenny, and welcome everybody. So I'm just going to kind of dive into definitions, which I'm sure is everybody's favorite thing. So we're really going to start with just what is apprenticeship? If we could go to the next slide, please. All right, so apprenticeship, and this might be a reason why a lot of people have joined today. It's been something of a buzzword for a while now. So it's kind of important to define what we really mean when we're talking about apprenticeship. And what we are talking about today goes beyond that very broad kind of historic idea of learning a trade and a set of skills from somebody with experience. What we're talking about is more specific. We're talking about registered apprenticeship, which is a structured and employer-driven training program. So a registered apprenticeship has kind of two equally important overlapping parts that comprise it. There's on-the-job training, and then there is classwork. And on-the-job training is often referred to as OJT. That classwork is often referred to as related technical instruction or RTI or something similar to that. Let's see. Most apprenticeship programs in the glazing trade are 3-year programs. So they usually consist of approximately 2,000 hours of OJT per year, combined with 144 hours of RTI. Apprentices are paid employees, and they earn higher wages as their skills increase. And completing a registered apprenticeship leads to nationally recognized credentials. For those using NGA's Glazier Apprenticeship curriculum, they get an NCCER Journeyman credential, and all apprentices get a Department of Labor issued certificate of completion. One last important note right here in red and bold, so you can't miss it, is that apprenticeship is not limited to union companies. That is a very prevalent myth, and it is not true. In almost all cases, a merit shop can sponsor their own apprenticeship program, or they can join a group program for merit shops, and we'll go into what that means in a few minutes. But the main takeaway here is that if you are not a union company, that does not mean that apprenticeship is not accessible to you. Right. So, as I touched on a moment ago, apprentices are employees, and more specifically, they're your employees. They are full-time, regular employees. In the vast majority of cases, they will also continue to work for you long after they complete the apprenticeship. They can be current employees that you have that have potential and some basic skills and you want to develop. They can be employees from outside. It can, the source of the apprentice really doesn't matter. But ultimately, when they become an apprentice, they work directly for your company. There's a couple things that make apprenticeship attractive to the apprentice. First is that paid aspect. They're full employees of your company, they earn wages, they earn benefits, and they're also not going into massive student debt while they learn the trade. So most of us are familiar with the student debt crisis, and apprenticeship has become a very attractive option for people that are trying to avoid student debt. So there is definitely a rumble on the job seeker side as well. This makes an apprenticeship a win-win for both you as the employer and the job seeker or the employee as the apprentice. Okay, so I've mentioned a little about how registered apprenticeship is structured training. So let me now dig in a little bit to where that structure comes from. So registered apprenticeship ultimately is a federal workforce development program. Depending on what state you're in, that program is going to be overseen either directly by the U.S. Department of Labor or what's called a state approved agency or SAA. And that just means that the state has decided that they want to be responsible for programs within their state, and the U.S. DOL has given them the authority to do that. So, what do I actually mean when I'm saying that programs are overseen? Regardless of whether it's an SAA state or an OA state, the government's role is really just to ensure that the programs are working in compliance with regulations. And those regulations are generally just going to be focused on apprentice safety, wages, the ratio of apprentices to journey workers on the job site, again, going back to safety, and the apprentice's progress through the program. So understandably, employers can be a little bit hesitant to invite the government into their business. And actually, Sarah, could we back up one? Sorry. Employers can be a little bit hesitant about that government involvement. So I also like to just kind of pause and take a moment to share that when I worked for New York State, I was one of the people that actually did that program oversight. And I can assure you my only concern about programs was that they were operating the way they should have been and that apprentices were getting appropriate training. There's no interest in any other aspect of the building, the business, sorry. Keep in mind too that states want apprenticeship programs. So the person that's doing the oversight, me in my past job, is really just as much a resource for the employer to support the programs, the employer or entity sponsoring the program, to navigate regulations, to find sources for new apprentices or other logistical challenges. And that's as much or even a bigger part of the job than it is going through that compliance checklist. And one last thing to note here is that because states are able to regulate programs within their jurisdiction, there can be a lot of variation in what apprenticeship looks like between different states. It's a situation where every state really is different when it comes to apprenticeship. And one of the services that NGA can provide is to, for me specifically, to help you navigate the system in your state. So just kind of be aware that there are sometimes significant differences state to state, but we will help you navigate them. All right, now next slide. Thank you. All right. So government provides guidelines and oversight for apprenticeship programs, but who do the programs belong to? So like I mentioned earlier, apprenticeships are employer driven, which means that there's no program without an employer to support it. Sometimes that employer is the program sponsor or the owner of the program, meaning that they employ the apprentices and the journey workers that those apprentices learn from, and they also handle all the program administration and any paperwork and reporting that has to happen. Generally, we call these individual programs. Other times, the employer employs the apprentices and the journey workers, but somebody else handles that program administration and paperwork. And we generally know these as group programs. So group programs traditionally are those that are run by the unions. They're generally what people are most familiar with, but they're not by any means limited to unions. They also can include programs that are run by an industry association, a community college, a group of employers that has gotten together and decided that they want to sponsor an apprenticeship program, and so on. So depending on your state, you most likely have the option of either sponsoring your own individual program or joining a group program. And we'll look into how to get involved with either one of those options in a few minutes. So next up, we're going to take a look at the business case for apprenticeship, and I'm just going to go ahead and hand it right over to my good friend Joshua Johnson.
Yes, good afternoon, everybody. Good afternoon. Thank you so much. As we think about it, Amy, you kind of you've You've laid the platform here for a fantastic conversation today to really talk about, what apprenticeship looks like. More importantly, what it looks like from an investment standpoint for employers. And I want to kind of hone in on a little bit of that here over the next few slides as I talk about what some of those benefits are. But we know by and far that there's been studies. There was a study done in Canada years ago. There's been current studies across the country here in America that talk about what the financial return on investment is. And we know with businesses, obviously, it's all about the bottom line. It's what it comes down to. Got to make sure we're making some money, even if it's a little bit of money. We got to make something for this. So we got to make something out of this investment. But we know that there's studies that show $1.47 return for every dollar invested, right? So that's almost half of what you invest, you get that in addition. And then we know that for companies, that's a huge deal. But we also know that for companies that engage in apprenticeship, it goes deeper than just financial ROI. And that's where we can bring in about our reduced turnover, right? So we think about the retention rate of completers. So individuals who complete the apprenticeship program, 94% of them stay with the company. Why is that so important? We hear so many times individuals will take programs, they'll take training programs, and as soon as they're done with the training program, they leave, right? They get whatever credential it is and they leave. Well, when they're in a registered apprenticeship program, 94% of them stay. And that's because of the training, the competencies, the skills that they went throughout that process with the company, but it's also the company's investment in them. Many times people are looking for that investment, and once that investment is made, they're not willing to cross the street for a quarter, right? And we've seen that. We've seen where people are, the culture or whatever it is here, I'll cross the street for a quarter. But we know that there's the 94% retention rate of completers. Increased productivity. Now with apprenticeship, with the training structure of apprenticeship, you're now able to train individuals to your exact specifications of the job. And we know as a company, we know companies, they struggle with bringing people in at entry level roles and trying to have them integrate into the system and try to learn things at a quick pace. Well, with the registered apprenticeship program, you have the ability to now train them to those exact specifications, and you can walk them, you can take your time and walk them through what those are. And then lastly, most importantly, it's safety improvement. We know that properly trained workers equal fewer accidents. We know that. Individuals who come in and don't have the pressure to try to perform, but have the pressure, or that don't have the pressure to perform, but have the ability to learn, we know that they're going to be safer. We know that they're going to improve the safety around machines or safety in the office, anywhere. We know that they have that ability once they're properly trained. Next slide, please. We also know that registered apprenticeship it delivers big time where it creates access to public works projects, creates access to employee pipelines, creates access to funding, creates access to lower recruitment costs. And we know that through registered apprenticeship, you are able to obtain higher quality employees and increased employee loyalty, right? These are six bullets. They kind of all work together. But when we think about the industry or we think about a industry, if we were just to focus here, we know that the glazer industry. I'll be upfront and honest and say the glazer industry is one of the construction occupations that a lot of folks struggle to know what it is that glazers do. And with an apprenticeship, you have the ability to now say, well, we do this, and here's how we can get you to this level. And we're going to use this structured training program apprenticeship to help you get to that level. So when you think about it as an employer, you think about, okay, you're fighting a good fight of trying to identify good quality workers, and you're trying to get people to understand what glazers do. Um, but you can also, circumvent some of that good fight that you're fighting with creating that registered apprenticeship program, which is, it's much. I won't say it's more known, but it's that training structure that then you can actually it gives credibility to your organization as you're trying to bring in new workers. Next slide, please. We also know that with registered apprenticeship, there's access. Let's talk about the access to public work opportunities. We know that there's federal projects and state and local projects out there that require contractors to have registered apprenticeship programs or to partner with approved programs. We know we've seen this across the country and locally, and this is by and far a way to engage, recruit, and I'll talk about this a little later. It's by and far a way to engage recruiting from a talent pool that has been long overlooked or a talent pool that has not had access to the promise of apprenticeship. So we know, that with this access to the public work opportunities, you know, we know that this gives the ability, number one, for the employer to continue to engage in work, continue keeping their doors open, continue bringing in a revenue. But number two, we also know that engaging in these big projects allows a company to grow and to access talent that they may not have accessed before. We know what that real impact is, right? We know that contractors that don't participate may be automatically disqualified from bidding or score lower than their competitors that are engaged with apprenticeship. So there's an all around benefit to building registered apprenticeship programs at your organization. And it's much deeper than just identifying strong talent. It's also a good business practice so that you can continue to grow and expand your business by bidding on these big jobs. Next slide, please. All right, so now let's talk about this. Let's get into how apprenticeship solves the recruitment, retention, and labor shortages. Couple points here that I like to highlight. Number one, it builds a reliable talent pipeline. When we think about apprenticeship, in my years in apprenticeship, many of the organizations and companies that I engage with, their number one struggle was how do we find talent? How do we engage talent? How do we let talent know that we're here? Well, when you build an apprenticeship program, you now have that structured training outline, which is what it is. Many times people think they hear registered apprenticeship program. It's not a program; it's a structured training outline, and it's the ability that you now can market that to individuals who currently work for you or to new individuals to come in and work for you. And it's going to give them the structure of the training that they're going to receive. They're going to know the competencies that they will secure at the end of the training. Most importantly, for most people, is they will know how much they're getting paid throughout the registered apprenticeship program. And I think one of the last things, and there's a couple other benefits in there, but they also leave with a credential, and that credential allows that talent pipeline to stay strong because now you're building the ability to bring individuals in and to elevate them through your organization. We know that it strengthens retention and loyalty. We know that. It's proven, as we talked about, 94% individuals stay at the company when they complete their registered apprenticeship program. We know that it lowers hiring costs and it reduces risk. Many times we hear how hard it is to onboard somebody, and many of you on this webinar may be in charge of some of your HR functions, and you're having those conversations about how much it costs to onboard an individual into your organization. Well, one of the things with an apprenticeship program is it's going to reduce that risk that's part of onboarding because individuals are going to come in and they're going to know what they're doing when they're working there, right? They're not going to come in and kind of wonder and then find another opportunity and leave to go to. They're going to be all in, so to speak, with the training. They're going to be ready from day one, knowing what their role is within the organization. Last two here, generate strong RI. We saw that, right? $1.47 to a dollar, and it creates that workforce stability. And I think most importantly, what apprenticeship does is it allows you to expand access to new talent pools. That is key. And if you've heard me speak at GlassBuild, you know I speak about justice impacted populations. But when we think about all populations, all individuals who have not had access to the promise of apprenticeship, as an organization, many times you've done recruiting, and we'll talk about this a little more throughout, but you've done recruiting and the tools that you have to recruit, are within your organization. When you don't have an apprenticeship program, maybe it's your retirement or maybe it's vacation you offer. When you have apprenticeship, you have an additional cachet of benefits to share with a potential apprentice or a potential employee about why it would be imperative for them to come work for your organization. Next slide, please. So now I want to talk about during my time at Jobs for the Future, overseeing a USDOL federal grant for the Center of Excellence in Registered Apprenticeship. We created a program design framework. And I just want to talk about a few of these elements. Two of these elements I'm going to talk about explicitly in the next slides, but just want to cover this because I found it really impactful to create something that employers can really understand, like what that looks like, what the process looks like, because many times employers don't really see what it looks like on the front end or what it takes to get to this point. So the first one I'm going to talk about here is leadership and staff composition. I always share this, and I share this, I believe at GlassBuild, I shared it as well. As you're building out what your next move is for an organization. And if you're preparing to go into apprenticeship, one of the first things I talk to employers about, organization about, is what does your leadership and staff composition look like? Can someone that you're recruiting from a talent pool that your organization has never recruited from before, can they see themselves on the wall of your organization? And if they can't, then those are deeper conversations that you have to have within your organization. But you really want to see what that looks like. And I think, one of the tools that I've recommended using, that complements this first look at what your organization looks like, from the top to the bottom, is looking at existing job requirements, such as prior years of work experience and credentials or degrees, and remove them totally if they like create unnecessary barriers to entry. Many times we see employers with outdated job postings of things that clearly you don't need those skills to be able to do that job, but they leave those in. And unfortunately, as an organization, that doesn't allow you to access the talent that you really want to bring in to create a really overall, community of talent from the community that you reside in. The second one we talk about is, um, excuse me, is, ooh, excuse me, I'm sorry. So I'm going to move into the organizations, or the supports, the excuse me, I'm sorry, organizational conditions to support success. So a couple of those there. We're going to talk about recruitment and retention explicitly as we move on. But I want to just hit on a few there as we talk about providing livable wages and advancement opportunities. Once again, this is where a registered apprenticeship outline is key. This spells out exactly what their wage is going to be, and that wage is set based on industry standard. And it also spells out what their advancement opportunities are throughout that apprenticeship program. We know that that's huge. That's key. That allows somebody to be invested in your organization. We also want to think about incorporate the voice of the individuals that you're trying to hire, or the individuals already in your company. So we talk about that participant voice, really building it authentically and building a culture of belonging within your organization. No matter what, when you bring somebody in new that's never worked as a glazer before, they don't know the culture of being a glazer. They don't know the culture of working for your organization as a glazer. So what you want to be able to do is you want to build that culture. You want to build that welcoming feeling that when any individual comes in to your organization or into your industry, that they understand what it means and that they feel welcome, even if they don't know anything about it, about construction. I think back when I became a construction worker, I had no clue what construction was. And this is back, in the early 2000s. Times have definitely changed over the past 20 years. But there was an amount of, if you didn't know this, you were hazed, right? We've seen that move on. We've seen that not happen as much as it used to. Definitely shouldn't happen at all, but we've seen it not happen as much as it used to. But that's about creating a culture of belonging. How do you make sure individuals don't feel like when they come into your organization or into your industry that they have to leave right away, because they just don't fit in? So how do you build that in? How do you talk to your apprentices? How do you talk to your employees and make sure you're reflecting on the training that they're receiving? Like talking about the skills they're building, and ask them what their career objectives are. What are their career goals? One of the next ones I want to talk about here is data. We know data is huge. We know data by and far provides a very clear sign of the success that you're having as a company, but also can provide a clear sign of the success you're having in training apprentices, in training your workforce. So think about how you've done industry analysis to see where there's opportunity for growth within the market for your company. Do those same analyses internally to see what is the landscape of your company to build an apprenticeship program. What is your landscape of the company to support an apprenticeship program? What is the landscape of your company to go out and recruit from talent pools that you've never recruited from before? Use that data to come up with a plan to create an informed plan to move forward with building those registered apprenticeship programs. One of the other things we'll talk about recruitment here coming up. We think about how are you, the classroom instruction. So for apprenticeship programs, how are you building that instruction, or the ability, apprenticeship is 80% on the job learning, 20% in the classroom. How are you making sure that the training and classroom instruction is accessible and it's representative participants. We know that, bringing individuals into apprenticeship or creating that opportunity, you're bringing in individuals from universal communities. So how are you making sure that the training plan is accessible and it's representative of your industry, but then also of the talent pool that you're trying to bring in to your organization? One of the last ones here is mentorship. I've shared this on a webinar just a few weeks ago. My introduction into mentorship in construction and when I was an apprentice, and it was a funny story, but it's mentorship is so important. I want you to think about mentorship, and I share this at GlassBuild as well. I want you to think about mentorship like this. It's not the person that's been at your organization the longest. It's the person at your organization that has the willingness and the willingness, skill, and ability to take somebody under their wing and help them understand the work they're doing as an apprentice, as a new worker as a glazer, but then also help them understand what the career ladder looks like within the glazer industry. It's someone who can come in and give an individual a full breadth of the conversation about becoming an apprentice and about growing within the industry. Many employers, they assign the individual who's been there for a long time to be the mentor. That's not always the best. I always say I'm a horrible mentor when it comes to doing construction work with my kids, because I'm very impatient. Once they don't get it, I'll just say move on and I'll do it myself. Um, We'll also talk about retention here coming up. And then lastly, what I want to talk about, which is actually the most important part of this conversation, is partnerships. I can't express enough how important having good partnerships are to help you in your success of thinking about, building, and executing your registered apprenticeship ideas and building those programs out. Those partnerships are internal as you're building and thinking about the idea, but more importantly, they're external. And I'll talk about a little bit of that on my recruitment slide, but I really want to hit home how important those external partnerships really are for you as an organization as you're building out your registered apprenticeship program. Next slide, please. So let's talk a little bit about recruitment here. Let's dive in. So this is directly from the JFF Program Design Framework, where it talks about using transparent and accessible practices to diversify recruitment. Many times individuals think the first interaction apprentices have is the first day they start work as an apprentice. But actually, the first interaction apprentices will have on an apprenticeship program or an employer occurs during that outreach and recruitment. So, who are you sending out to do outreach and recruitment? That's number one. That's a huge, huge thing that you have to think about as an employer is. And many of you on the call may have gone out to job fairs before. Who's being sent out to do the recruiting? Is it someone who's been in the industry? Is it someone who just knows a little bit about the industry? Are you going to recruit women into the glazer industry? And there's some big burly guys that are out there doing the recruitment, right? What does that look like? Are you, no knock, but are you going to recruit youth into your company for your registered apprenticeship program or into the industry, and you're sending out guys like me who are 50 years old who have kids that are recruiting, right? Who are you sending out? And it's really that becomes thoughtful, and you have to be very thoughtful. And I'll share on the next slide the word that I use around that, but that's intentional, right? You have to be intentional in your recruitment efforts. What does that look like? Recruiting now no longer is by happenstance. We've seen that go away in the 90s and early 2000s, where it's just, hey, I found a great person to come in and work. Now you have to be intentional, because those pools don't exist in the same way that they did back then. Those pools now, they're looking for other work because they don't even know this work exists. So how are you being intentional? Which means being done on purpose, being deliberate. How are you doing that? Who are you sending out to those job fairs? Who are you connecting with to let know that you have open availability within your apprenticeship programs? Next slide, please. So one of the things here as we talk about is retention. What is that retention? What are retention resources? What are they? Because many times organizations, they think about what potentially they need and how they can get individuals to be supported as they're in their apprenticeship program. So I'm speaking in the future tense for you all that are potentially building apprenticeship programs, but this is also something you should be thinking about. As I always say, build it from the backward and come down and make sure that when you get to the bottom, you have everything ready. But as you think about those retention, how are you retaining individuals within your registered apprenticeship programs? Who are you engaged with in your community for those opportunities, right? So we see here a couple of them, right? Housing stability, emergency assistance. And what we think about here as we talk about what these retention resources are in the organizations, these don't have to be for new individuals you're bringing into your company. This is like you can have an employee assistance program within your organization, but having this at the local level is even more valuable to your employees than you could ever imagine. So thinking about transportation, right? Where are your education training providers? Childcare. We've heard this. We've heard childcare as being one of the biggest ones. Quick story here. One of the apprentices when I was in Wisconsin was part of was an electrician, and she was up for her third year raise. Well, if she got her third year raise, it immediately knocked her off of her benefits that she had. She hit the benefits cliff. Many of you may have heard of benefits cliff. If you have not, definitely look it up. It's real. It actually exists for individuals who are really out here trying to move their lives forward with jobs. Well, if you make too much money, it removed her child care, and it did not replace the amount of money that she made would not replace the child care that was removed. So she turned down the raise. The individuals from the committee, they could not believe it. Like no one had ever turned down a raise before. That's what everybody waits for, is that raise. But they didn't understand it because as an organization, as a committee, and as employers, they didn't understand how important childcare was to one of their apprentices. Now, I'm not saying you all don't understand that, but what I'm saying is engage in those conversations with those organizations that are in your community. Engage in those conversations so that if you do have an apprentice or an employee come through that needs those resources, you've now created an additional piece of loyalty because you've given them resources they've needed at a very tough time in their life many times. Next slide, please. So one of the things here that we before it rolls back over to Amy, one of the things I wanted to talk about as well. There's facts, not myths, and as on top of this, what I want to cover is thinking about your recruiting. Where are you recruiting from? So before I dive into this slide, what I want to throw is where are you recruiting from? And I'm hitting this again because I want to get just a little bit more detailed before we move on with the slide presentation. Where are you engaging? Many of you as employers, you may have handshake engagements with programs within your community. You may send out emails to organizations in your community. You may post it on Indeed or on job boards. But how many of you are building relationships with the organizations within your community that serve the people of the community that your business is in? And I want that to be one of the things as we leave from this webinar, once it's over. One of the things that you go back and proactively do is, even if it's just one, build a relationship or build relationships with those organizations in your community that serve the community. And when I say build relationships, I mean go meet with them, see what they're doing, invite them in your doors so they can see what you do. Help them understand what being a glazer is. Help them understand the process to apply to become a glazer. Help them understand your recruitment goals and ask how can you support their goals, because many of their goals are to engage their customer and get them working and get them into opportunities where they have family sustaining careers. So build that relationship, and not a passive relationship. Build a very proactive, intentional relationship. And as you're building your apprenticeship programs, maybe one of those organizations that you partner with becomes your dedicated talent pipeline. Who knows? It's all about building that relationship so that you now have access to the individuals within your community. Because sometimes employers hire individuals from outside their community and bring them in to do work and to work on projects. But how much more impactful for your building to sit inside of a community and the individuals that work for you are largely from that community because you've built these strong relationships and you become a fabric of that community and a fabric of individuals' lives. Much like many glazer, as well as other construction occupations, much like many of their businesses were, they're family businesses. Think of the same way when you're building and establishing credibility within a community. But lastly, here I'll hit on these facts and not myths. Apprenticeships provide career paths to many white collar professions, not just union and the trades. Now, that isn't always relevant, for a conversation with someone from a construction occupation, but it's really important to understand that that's your competition. So many times, back in the day, it was just, hey, you were construction or manufacturing. Now, apprenticeship has access to healthcare. It has access to cybersecurity, IT, transportation, has access to all these individuals. So now you're competing with those, white collar professions, gray collar professions, for those potential apprentices. So when you think about that as you're building out your program and what that looks like, apprenticeships can be used in any size company. One thing that I've always hit on as a former state director in apprenticeship in Wisconsin, I always talk to companies and they would tell me flat out, Josh, we just have 4 employees. We're just not big enough to do an apprenticeship program. I was like, well, you're wrong. I actually have a company that only has 2 employees. It's a husband and wife, and they hire an apprentice every year. So it does not matter what size company it is, as long as you're able to provide the on-the-job learning for the individual that you bring in as an apprentice and a dedicated mentor for that individual that's an apprentice. And lastly, apprenticeship program can be modified to meet the needs of the employer and the apprentice. So that program is designed when you build a program, when you work with Amy to build a program, it's designed with flexibility in mind. These are not rigorous. You have to do this, this, and this. There's the ability to be flexible and to be innovative to allow your organization to engage in apprenticeship and to bring in talent that you may not have accessed before and allow them to grow within your industry. Next slide. All right, and I'll kick it back over to my friend Amy.
All right, thank you much, Josh. All right, so hopefully you're interested in moving forward with an apprenticeship, and I'm sure the question on your mind is where to start. So if we can go into the next slide. This is, again, one of those questions where every state is different. So there's not one surefire way that it's going to work. We're going to be very, 30,000-foot view here, and then we can kind of direct you to get individual directions for your state. So when you kind of take that high level view, there's 2 paths to get involved. And ultimately, which one makes the most sense for you is really going to come down to A, what's available in your state or your local area, and B, does an individual or a group program make more sense for your specific company? So the slide we're looking at right now and the next one can kind of, they're meant to help you start thinking along those terms of which path is best for me. And that's something where I'm also happy to help you navigate that process individually as well. So for an individual program, path 1 here, the main consideration is capacity. Do you have the capacity to take on program development and administration? And this is very much a state-by-state question. So because some states, and I come from one of them, New York is a little bit tedious in application processes and reporting requirements, whereas other states are a much lighter touch, a much quicker process, and so on. So it, again, varies very much from state to state. You'll actually want to work in conjunction with your state representative. They can help you understand the requirements in your area so that you can make that right decision and have a solid idea of, are you going to have to report things quarterly, or is it once a year, or is it every 5 years? That's kind of how great these differences can be. And we'll show you a tool shortly that can help you find your state representative as well. The next slide, please. The main considerations to think about as far as whether a group program is right for you are, again, capacity. But even if you have a business that's big enough, you've got plenty of staff, somebody's got, enough time to handle the administrative side, you may just prefer to let somebody else do that piece so that you can focus on providing that on-the-job training for your apprentices. The other thing to keep in mind is that group program sponsors are usually going to charge a fee for providing those administrative services. And there's really kind of no way to know from the outside what that fee is. You just need to reach out to the group program sponsor and see what you'd be looking at. And that makes for a great segue into the next slide, which is the NGA resources to help you kind of work through this process. So Sarah, if you don't mind clicking the link so that we can go to our webpage. So this is just a very quick tour of what we have available for you. Scrolling down, it's just kind of, some of the information we're sharing today. What is apprenticeship? What's a group method? What's an individual program? How do you start your own? How do you join something that already exists? But most importantly is this map here. So we developed this to direct you to both existing group programs and the state representative in your state. So the orange dots that you see are the group programs, and we don't have them in every state, but we are regularly expanding, so this map will change. But if you click on the orange dot, it gives you contact information for a group program that has a glazing program that uses the NGA curriculum. If you just click on the state itself and not the dot, it takes you to the state's apprenticeship webpage. So you can get information from that state specifically, and all of them will have contact information as well, so that you can actually reach out to a representative and, again, find out what their processes are as far as the application, as far as reporting going forward, and kind of begin that conversation of how to get a program started in your state. That is also something that I'm happy to work with you with as well. If you're not really sure where to begin with your state representative and would like to kind of schedule a three-way call so that I can kind of help you interpret, I'm happy to do that. Feel free to reach out. So that is our apprenticeship webpage. If we can go back to the slide deck. And I'll hand it back to Jenni, and she can talk about the different ways that NGA can help.
I'm getting there. Hold on. Sorry. I'm always the problem when it comes to the audio visual, but you can just hear me talk. You'd probably rather hear me talk than see me. Okay, so how can NGA help? So as Josh said, it's really important for a successful registered apprenticeship program to have external partners, and NGA wants to be your external partner. And we can do that in a couple of ways. The first is, as we've described, in order to have a registered apprenticeship program, there's the on-the-job training component, and then there's the classroom instruction component. So NGA has the curriculum that you need for the classroom component. So it's correct me if I'm wrong, Amy, it's 412-ish hours.
432.
That meets the Department of Labor requirements. It has been approved by NCCER, so that means that any glazers that complete the NGA Glazier Apprentice Curriculum receive their NCCER certification, indicating a journey worker level certification. They also receive their journey worker card from the Department of Labor. We currently have 33 programs using this curriculum in 27 states and one up in Canada. All of this curriculum runs through the My Glass Class platform. So if you're familiar with My Glass Class, apprentices access this curriculum through that platform. So they can take their online classes there. They will receive the appropriate books from NGA. We basically provide you with the classroom curriculum as a package. We also provide tools for your hands-on trainers. So whoever in your company, and this goes back to, really looking at your staff capacity, whoever in your company is going to be responsible for overseeing the apprentices, they can work with Amy to get set up in My Glass Class so that they can monitor your apprentices' progress through the program, so they can see the classes they've completed, the tests they've completed, all of that. And then also through that platform, they have access to hands-on training tools. So there are checklists that you can go through to just make sure that your apprentices are completing the various on-the-job training that they need to do as they progress through the program. So we've really tried to make this as plug and play as possible for you. And we do have, because we have a number of programs that are up and running, we can connect you to programs that are similar to what you're thinking of developing. So if you're like, hey, I want to do it this way, I'll say, hey, or not me, Amy will say, oh, great, we've got a company in New Mexico who does it with this way. I'm sure they'd be happy to talk to you. So we do also help facilitate peer connections. Again, other partners in the industry who can help share their best practices and how they've gotten their programs off the ground. So, in terms of the classroom component, NGA's got you. Moving on, in terms of the costs associated with a registered apprenticeship program, obviously you have your internal costs. Whatever staff you identify to, if you choose to start your own program, you have, you're going to need to pay someone to take on that responsibility. If you choose to enter a group program where they handle all of the administration, they actually work directly with NGA to run the program, then that group, as Amy mentioned, will most likely have some sort of administrative fee. What NGA does, though, is we pay through the NGA Foundation for the curriculum costs itself. So typically, you'll have, the curriculum is something that you have to pay for each employee. It's a 3-year curriculum. It's 412. What is it, Amy? 412, 420. I want to get the right number.
32.
432. I was close. The 432 hours of education obviously has a very concrete value to it. But NGA is working with partners like FHC and other industry companies to raise funds to help pay for that curriculum. So currently, and as long as funds last, you can get that curriculum for your apprentices free of charge. And then you're only responsible for a small administrative fee. And that really just covers your access to the My Glass Class platform. So we're really trying to make this as accessible as possible because we believe in the benefits of apprenticeship. We believe it will move our industry forward. So this is an ongoing campaign on behalf of the NGA to make funds available to help offset costs of registered apprenticeship. The other thing that I wanted to touch on is Josh's point to ensuring that apprenticeship is accessible. We do offer all of our apprentice curriculum in Spanish as well. So if your employee base is largely Spanish speaking, we do have that available. Again, available for free through the NGA Foundation. And just recently this year, we began partnering with member companies who have apprenticeship programs or solid training programs to participate in career fairs and to help guide you through that process. And as Josh was talking about, make sure that you're getting the right people out in the field to recruit from the communities that you're in. So those are some of the ways that NGA can help. Amy's going to go through some additional ways in terms of administration. I will say that Amy has a great team on staff to walk you through this process. My advice is always to go to that website first, to get all the information, to really think about what's right for you, and then you can call us. And by us, I mean Amy. She's like, to really go through what your needs are and to talk through your options. But we have a dedicated team at NGA that focuses on apprenticeship that is here to help you navigate the process and create a program that's right for you. We did, I think, Josh touched on as well, that apprenticeship programs are flexible. So while the curriculum is the curriculum, that's what makes it a registered program. It has to be approved by the state or by the Department of Labor because we want to ensure it's very high quality and it's meeting the correct standards. How you present that curriculum within your company and how you make it work for you is flexible. And we have a lot of different models with different companies of different sizes and different capacities, so we can help you figure out what works best for you. So Amy, you want to tell them what you personally can do for them?
I started talking on mute. All right, so thanks, Sarah, and thanks, Jenny, for the handoff. So yeah, as far as services that I specifically and NGA more broadly can assist with, refer to this list right here. So I'm happy to lend some guidance in creating a new program that is kind of the majority of my background is program development. I can also assist in existing programs and helping them grow and expand their footprint. Happy to also help out with just general information and connecting you to the existing group programs that we work with. Very broadly, just is apprenticeship right for you and your business? We can certainly have a conversation and dig into that. Between myself and Elaine, who's our LMS manager, we can train your administrators. So, not only just make sure that, of course, you report whatever the state needs to the state, but how does your administrator use the LMS? How do you use those tools, pull reports, et cetera? We can get your apprentices enrolled into the curriculum. And anytime your state or the USDOL needs documentation about the curriculum, we will provide you with whatever you need. And kind of going back to some of the things that Josh was talking about earlier, those partnerships with external agencies, that is another piece of my background with workforce development with the state. So if you don't know where to turn in your local community, I can certainly help you find out what exists and get you pointed in the right direction to start building those relationships. So,
And
yeah, those are many of the ways that we can help. If you've got an idea and it's not on that list, feel free to approach me. I will probably be more than happy to work with you on that.
and can I just throw out a quick challenge to the folks that are on here, Amy and Jenny? Many of you who are on here, you may have joined because you were interested to learn about what apprenticeship is. Maybe some of you are at companies that you're like, this will be really good. Some of you might be at companies like, I don't know if we're really ready at that point yet. If you don't do anything else, call Amy, have a conversation with Amy. Many times, we find I think about, my time in the apprenticeship system, many employers, some of the questions they had or some of the trepidation they had came from information that was bad information they got from somebody else. Right. I think about when we talk to our kids, I stress this to my kids all the time. Don't come tell me what you think, tell me what you know. Same thing here. When you're thinking about building an apprenticeship program, many of you may have heard conversation, many of you have or heard remarks or had conversations about what apprenticeship is or isn't. Get it directly from the source, which is Amy. Amy was respected in the field when she did her work in New York, so she knows her stuff, right? This is me, giving huge props to Amy as someone who was able to build effective programs. Have that conversation with her, and then take that conversation back internally to the individuals that you may need to have them with. As you think about building an apprenticeship program, I know it's scary. I know it's something like I don't know if we're ready for this. Just start with having a conversation first. So you might find out that you're already doing exactly what an apprenticeship requires. All you're going to do is formalize it. And by formalizing it, you now have access, as I talked about, you have access to those federal jobs or those additional state and local jobs. Most importantly, you have access to building a really strong talent pipeline into your organization so that your organization can grow. And what I always just tell employers, what is it going to take for you to compete locally, nationally, and globally? At one of those three, it takes people. So apprenticeship gives you the ability to bring in people and bring them in at a level that you don't have to have all these skills and degrees and education. You're able to walk in right off the street, and we're going to give you a program. We're going to give you a structured training outline that's going to get you up to where you need to be when you're done, so that you could be of value not only to us as an organization, but to our industry as we grow our industry out. So long story short, call Amy, have a conversation with Amy. Let Amy be your apprenticeship guide throughout this process. And when you're having those conversations internally, once you talk to Amy, reach out to me if you're trying to figure out how to tap into those recruitment pools and trying to find out where and how to access them or want to get introduced and to have those conversations.
Absolutely. And we will be sending out after the webinar a follow up with both Amy's information and Josh's information so that you can contact them directly. I do want to be respectful of everyone's time. We have about 5 minutes left. If anyone has questions, I don't see any in the chat right now, which means we did an amazing job. But if something has popped into your head that you'd like to add into the chat right now, please feel free. And while I'm waiting for that, I will just remind you that our next event for NGA is the BEC conference. That is in March of 2026. All three of us will be there, myself, Joshua, and Amy. You will have opportunities to meet with all of us if registered apprenticeship is something that you are interested in. Josh will be giving a fantastic presentation, really digging into employee recruitment and strategies that you can employ at your company. So he'll be a keynote speaker there. So I would encourage you to check that out. And in the meantime, yes, please reach out to Amy. There is I don't know where it went, but on the if you go to myglassclass.com, you'll see a specific section for apprenticeship, and there you will find Amy's information to contact her directly. And like I said, everyone who attended will receive a follow up with both her info and Josh's. So thank you all for your time. It looks like we are good to go with questions. So I appreciate your time today, and I hope to see and talk with you all soon.
Have a happy holiday, everyone.
Take care.